Did you have a mom and pop Italian restaurant or bakery that made a significant impact on your childhood? Because I sure did. It's easy to list off a bunch of different restaurants or bakeries that I grew up with growing up right outside of Chicago. But one that really comes to mind is a restaurant called Vincitori that, man, I went to with my family so many times, and so many important celebrations and occasions were spent there. It was like your traditional red sauce Italian American restaurant with white tablecloths, and one of those little um, table toppers. It was like paper, so you could draw on it. I always remember as a kid having like crayons and markers and whatever, pencils, pens, whatever, drawing different stuff on the table because it was that paper tabletop. And it was just super homey. My family knew the family that owned the restaurant. It was only about 15 minutes from my house, and we spent like times after communions or confirmations or birthdays or any party we basically didn't have at home or a relative's house was there, and we would get kind of this whole section of the restaurant and have like usually multiple tables or a really long table just depending on the occasion. It was to the point where I really felt like a local going to that restaurant. I mean, thinking back, I haven't been to that restaurant in such a long time. It's no longer there, but maybe it's been, I don't know, 12, 15 years, and I still can only remember a handful of things on their menu because I think as a kid, I pretty much just ordered the same things. It was always appetizer. I always remember their mussels in a like a white wine sauce that was so delicious that we would always just take the bread afterwards, like the whole loaf basically, and just go at that sauce, right? And it was always funny because I was just that weird kid at like 6 or 7 years old at school on the paper, and I would be writing that my favorite food was mussels. Nobody knew what that was in my school, especially like 6 or 7 years old. They're like, "Oh, your favorite thing is like eating your mussel." Like they literally thought I was misspelling like mussels as a part of the body when I was just talking about the seafood, the shellfish. But you know that goes back. My love of that definitely goes back a lot to that restaurant. And then I would always get the cheese ravioli with red sauce. So it was basically super simple, just the ravioli with ricotta inside, and you know, just red sauce and a little parma on top. And then for my drink, I feel like I always had a Shirley Temple, which is what is it based? I think it's like, is it like cherry 7 Up with or something like, or Sprite or something with cherry syrup or whatever it is, something like that. And then dessert, I would almost always have lemon ice, lemon Italian ice. It was just like a little bowl of lemon ice to finish my meal. And I always remember those things. There was a lot of great memories at that restaurant. And it was a place that we went a lot. And I feel like in the Italian diaspora, or even in Italy itself, because we're such community oriented people and a lot of our biggest memories, family occasions are surrounded by some level of importance when it comes to food. I would assume that a lot of people who have an Italian background can think of that one restaurant or bakery just off the top of your head that made an impact. Like you went there every week, like every Saturday morning with your grandparents, or every special occasion you ended up at this restaurant, or something like that. It plays a huge part, I think, in the childhood of many people in the diaspora. It surely did for me. And that feeling of community, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of having that connection with food, which frankly wasn't that different of what I was already eating at home, which is why a lot of Italian or Italian American folks, or people anywhere, they don't necessarily eat Italian or Italian oriented food out that much, because if you're part of the diaspora and you had the cooking in your household or you cook yourself, oftentimes you don't want to go out and get that food, you want to get something different. But there is still those standout places that made certain things that you wouldn't make at home, but the flavors and the familiarity was always there, whether with the food or with the people who own the restaurant or the workers in the restaurant. You got to know the owners, or you already knew the owners, or you got to know the workers there, or even just some other regulars, which happens in places like that. And oftentimes, for a lot of people in the Italian diaspora, since our families were so involved in certain industries, food being one of the main ones, I'm sure a lot of you actually had restaurants or bakeries that, you had cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, whatever, that owned them. And so you spent a lot of your childhood and a lot of your memories outside of the house in a restaurant or a bakery that was family owned within someone in your family. And I think that's super cool too. I obviously didn't have that experience. So mine was kind of the second tier, which is knowing the family that runs the restaurant and having a lot of great experiences there. It's just something that I'll always remember. And to be honest, it's been kind of top of mind for me because I feel like growing up, there was that kind of handful of places in the Chicago area that were that Italian American home feeling. And it's hard to find that in today's world, especially when you move somewhere else. And also with just COVID and all the different things that happened, having a lot of restaurants that didn't make it, or people retired, or they moved on, or someone in the family isn't going to take over the business, or they moved away, or they moved the restaurant to another state. It's great memories that, I'm obviously I'm young, so I know that people older than me will probably have even more intense community experiences in their local little Italies, whether it's in some part of the US or abroad. I would love to hear in the comments below some of your favorite places that you've been and or that made a huge part of your childhood, and what areas they were in, what city, what neighborhood, what was the restaurant, if it's still around. I find that all really interesting because I think builds into a big fabric of how we are as a diaspora community, because we did have this sense of community, a lot of us growing up, and we did have these places and these experiences that really embedded our culture within us. And those are some of the aspects why I'm sitting here today making this video and having ORIUNDI as an existing thing, because I had these experiences. I see what the community is and what it can be, and that it's so wonderful and beautiful on a small level. And I hope that the next generation continues to have those type of experiences, because they are positive things. They're community things. They're things that shaped me and made me even more interested in my heritage, in the food of my culture and beyond. So like I said, please let me know in the comments below what restaurants, bakeries, or any other food institution that you had growing up that made a significant impact on you, because I know probably most of you out there have one. So with that said, ciao for now, and I can't wait to read the places that influenced you positively, food-wise, in your childhood.